Well, hooey, I believe I'm live on Facebook. Well, I haven't been live on Facebook for, about 2 days. So I'm feeling real excited. I think I'm going to start having an accent like this from now on. Do you reckon that's going to, change anything about the way you see me? Because if I were to just start talking like this, I don't know why I'm doing this. Good morning, everybody, or good evening, everybody. When you do come in, if you could shoot a hello in the comments, that would be rad. It always takes a few minutes for people to really come in, and so I'm going to talk some shit until until it feels like there's a bit of an audience going. And there you go. The topic today is endless processing. And this came up because I know the propensity inside myself towards endless processing. I also observe it in quite a lot of people, individually and as well as in group settings. So it'd be fun to jump into something like that. Oh no, I see my crying child outside. He must have hurt himself. Endless processing. Yeah, so I see one person on, but again, I'm going to just wait here for a few people to jump on. Comments. Lena says, hello, Josh. Hello, darling. You are the one person that's on right now. Can you, because again, we're going to wait for things to kick off here just for a second, but have you ever heard of endless processing, Lena? If you have, can you type it in the box? And look, I see a couple more people are coming on right now. Yeah, so we're going to talk about this thing called endless processing. And I first heard the words endless processing in spiral dynamics, which is a map that I study. And yeah, Lena was addicted to endless. It feels like a, what do you call it? AA meeting. I am an endless processing addict. And so what this thing is, and again, I'm talking about this because I've been through it quite a bit myself, and I can see it societally, and I can see it within individuals and groups and close friends. This idea of endless processing is that, let's say, I always like to talk about things from where they come from as well. We as a culture hadn't processed much, like for a long time, especially like more white colonized culture. There was like and not just that, like a lot of culture, because the idea was that we were in survival mode. So when people are in survival mode, which means we're just trying to make sure that we're eating, we're just trying to make sure that we're housed, we're just trying to make sure that we have enough finances or whatever the form of currency is to keep going, there it's pretty much impossible to then go into deeper matters within ourselves. And because historically there's been pain and abuse and just it's been actually really fucked up for the last little while. There's this feeling of a lot of backlogged emotions and a lot of backlogged pain and a lot of backlogged issues that we all carry. And because nobody was processing at all for a long time, like if back in the day, like 100 years ago, if you were like, are you feeling sad, they'd be like, I don't have time for that, or I have to get the fuck to this thing to make sure that this thing happens, to make sure this thing happens. There was just wasn't extra space and time to be able to go into deeper matters inside of the body. And now we're living in a culture where things are, generally safe. It's not true for everybody, but there's a lot of spaces where we have safety and we have space and we have time. And so we're able to now go into our bodies and go into our emotions and start to feel some of the backlog pain historically and ancestrally that sits in us. It's fucking cool, actually. That one thing might be one of the coolest things that we're doing in this current time, is that we have this big, huge opportunity to finally start to process the pain and process the issues and process and go into deep. Because when we process emotions, it also leads us into different aspects of our body and self that are often spiritually connected. So a lot of times if a person's looking to get spiritually connected, the first step is actually to get into the issues and the pain and the blocks inside of the body and start to work those through so that we are clear and more connected. The I'm going to say issue, but the Challenge then becomes, though, when we start to do this type of work and we start to go into the body to try and find these issues and we start to process this pain that's been backlogged, it's possible to get stuck in spirals or get stuck in loops. And those loops, when we're processing and when we start to get into these things, can get us into a place where we are endlessly processing the issues. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is that a lot of them are just very complex. So I want to speak about things in a reasonable manner here. The reason that we're constantly going through issues is because they're very complex and it takes a long time to go into something and to figure it out. But there's an edge where sometimes we just have to just drop everything, including the healing process, including trying to be spiritual and trying to do. Sometimes you have to drop all of that just to be. And if we are so used to being in an action-oriented situation where we have to complete this and we have to complete that, and again, for survival, we have to go to work, we have to do this, we have to do this. When we're in that mode where we're trying to do all the time, then when it comes to these deeper matters, like something as deep and as real as healing and going into our processes, while that is incredibly beautiful, it's possible to start to apply that same "I'm going to get it" model to our own emotions and processing. And there is an addictive quality to the chemicals that happen when we feel emotional. So there's a feeling that it's possible to get addicted to pain. It's possible to get addicted to sadness. It's possible to get addicted to happiness. Like that's very much an addiction. So remembering that when we have emotions in our body, it's possible to also get addicted to those. So let's picture we are processing and feeling the release of some of that pain in the body. It's possible to get addicted to that process, not just the experience of lifting, but the process of going into things and lifting them. And if we can get into, oh, just one second here. I see some comments. Oh, I see a bunch of people are in here. It doesn't show that on the thing. Jillian Amber come in to say, I call that action-oriented the disembodied warrior. Woo! I would love for you to type a little bit more about that. Could I hear a bit more of an expanded understanding of what the disembodied warrior means? Thank you. And Lisa comes to say, hey, Josh, yeah, I agree with you, brother. I think there's an addictive quality to good processing. Funny, I typed that as you also said addictive feeling. Yeah, exactly. So there's an addictive feeling towards processing that then can almost like subconsciously set us up in a new trap where we're just constantly processing. We're constantly going into our emotions. We're constantly, and again, I want to say this in a way that honors the fact that nobody was processing properly before as well. Like it's not that it's just for fun. It's like, fuck, man, like for so long, there was no emotional intelligence, no ability to go into the body and understand. If you were in, a few generations ago, if you were to say, I feel sad, someone might come up and hit you. So like the chances of us having, again, the space in a cultural, familial, societal, and personal setting to be able to go into these things and start to do that work was almost nil. And now that it's open, that's fucking awesome. So this isn't about ignore your issues or taking the opposite side of that at all. However, if we find ourselves constantly kind of kicking for the next release and craving the next process, and yeah, Helena just said, I feel sad for my mom and dad. Yeah, when we talk about the past and when we talk about the people that have come before us, it was rough. I'm actually going to do a whole other live stream on this soon, but I'm going to just break into this for a second. If the world is made of frequency and vibration, which it seems to be, there was a very limited bandwidth of possibility very, very recently. It was very hard. It's like, imagine, again, just having, if you want to use the chakras, it would just be the lower few chakras that were available. And now, again, we're opening up. So many more people have hearts that open. We have minds and spirits that open now. But it was not the case just recently. And yeah, they could have healed a little if they were raised around this time. Well, the interesting thing is that we are in that chain of where our parents are. And so we're doing this, for them or with them in a way, like this is how the ancestral thing works. There's a feeling that In Native culture, there's an idea of 7 generations. And it means that the work that we do right now heals 7 generations backwards and sets up 7 generations forwards. So the idea is that, yes, it is terrible that our families and, grandparents and great grandparents didn't get to have that space, but we're being called right now to be the people to do that work. And that's why it's funny again, because it's like you don't want to talk shit about processing or healing, because this is what we have to do right now. This is the most important thing that we could ever do, is go through healing processes. But while we're doing that, let's just be careful not to fall into an addictive pattern or a yearning as this disembodied warrior that Jillian Amber said. I really hope that you can type that out more, because the idea of a warrior that wants to go and kick ass in our own healing is beautiful. But if that warrior won't stop and won't let the being of our body have its say as well, or have its space as well, and we get into cycles where we have to constantly I remember I just flashed into a point in my life where I couldn't, all I was doing, like, I swear to fucking God, and I was freaking people out too, because a lot of people weren't even ready to do that kind of processing. And I'm just sitting here going like, and I've got this issue and I've got that issue, and I can see where that comes from. I can see where that comes from. It comes from here, comes from here. But like, these are people that were just like at a party or something. So learning discernment, and having the space to heal, but then reset. So after we go through a big process, just be fucking normal sometimes too. Sometimes it's time to just like have a tea and have a sit and relax. If we're not used to being able to access our being and that relaxed state, then we're going to keep on again applying that zealous attitude, as we have to work and to material gain. We'll apply that into our own spiritual processes too, and those can eventually become new blocks. So by having an addiction towards processing, suddenly we can't access our being again. And maybe the point was that we did access our being in order to finally get deeper into the body, but then again our patterns will hijack the process and we'll end up in an endless process. Jillian just said the disembodied warrior is a constant fight or flight response. Our ancestors were in this mode. It's the toxic masculine of war, abuse, fighting, alcoholism, addiction, dissociation, essentially the bully. When in war and separate, we disembody and the defense mechanisms in check. This energy lives in our land and DNA. Yeah, you're fucking right, it does. Any are still living in this energy, including myself at times. I love that fucking self-honesty, because of course I fall into all these same, anything I'm talking about it because it's still active in my field, Since the Queen's passing, I feel that it's being pulled from the land of DNA. It's very loud. Disembodied warrior meant freedom and victory. I think it still lives in the body and mind. Yeah, right. So again, this warrior attitude of we're going to fucking heal. We're going to go into this and we're going to attack our shadows and we're going to attack our ego. That was the big one, right? We're going to fight that ego. Well, look, that whole thing ends up being essentially a re-experience of the same thing from the past, right? So before it was all in survival mode that we were going to attack that fight or flight. Now, but suddenly it's in spirituality, that flight or flight. We just have to remember that there is a sense of being that isn't any of those things. It doesn't need to be in process. It doesn't need to be in healing mode. And through being, this is interesting, through being very slowly and over time, these things do start to heal and they do start to process. So if we don't come at it like we're fighting, but we're able to access a sense of being and a sense of relaxed space and a sense of consciousness where we can really take a peek and look around, there tends to be a natural healing as well. And yeah, so having more space leads us to having access to different parts of our psyche and different parts of our emotions, and to go into pain that we can process. Trying to come at it like we're going to fucking kick it, and we're going to beat that shit out of that, like this disembodied warrior that Jillian Amber is talking about, can lead us into a place where we're endlessly processing. And it becomes a new addiction, it becomes a new mindset, it becomes a new belief system as well. And then we end up just constantly processing, which is cool, but it's taxing on our body. Sometimes we go through a healing run, then we can relax, integrate, figure out what's going on, like there's a time and space for both. Lisa said, when we process over frequently, there's really no time to integrate. That's exactly what I said. Sorry, I clicked it before I read that. So yeah, processing needs to occur, but without that integration, we might actually building what I consider a false processing. I'd love for you to, if you could, write more thoroughly what false processing means to you, Lisa. That'd be super helpful. So actually, it's similar to, it's funny, a comment, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but there was a comment on the Gabor Mate post that I posted a little while ago, or a couple days ago. And he was just saying that using psychedelics is a bad thing to do. And if you use psychedelics, you're just giving yourself a little tiny relief, but it's not real healing. Well, I would argue that this same thing of going through big processes is very similar to psychedelic trips. They can be so helpful. A psychedelic trip, especially if it's a pattern interrupt. So we're doing the same thing all the time, and suddenly we have a little psychedelic trip, and boom, we're able to see things from a different perspective. So again, if we are also endless, or we're processing something big and we're going through a big revolution on the inside, boom, something might happen and we can see things from different perspectives. Then the same thing with psychedelics, the same thing with these big processes, being able to take a step back, integrate, allow our sense of being to be first. If we can master that process of going into these deeper emotions and then going into more calm, gentle spaces in the inside, and then going back into process, and then going back into the calm, if we can find a rhythm, then it'll end up working better. If we're only on that one track and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, then it can turn into its own problem. And again, our body as well. I went through a process a couple of days ago where I was really challenging some deep belief systems inside of myself. And I ended up having a headache. And I thought that was the most interesting thing, because I was like, again, trying to do, I was definitely going into, and very purposefully going into these aspects of my mind and challenging them to reframe and and look at things a little bit differently. But it gave me a headache. So imagine if we're doing all this healing and our body is on overdrive, and there starts to be new tension and new things that build up because we're trying to process. But when we integrate all those tensions, it can come back into a space of being. So when we're challenging something or we're finding something inside, it's going to flare up, as we all know. Like anybody that I know, and myself very much included, when we're going through something, there is an effect that it has on the body. And oftentimes it is that very effect, which is also a part of healing. So let's say, again, I'm dealing with something in my head, headache. If I'm dealing with something in my stomach, maybe a stomach ache or a chest ache or whatever. But when we're going through that process, it's important to then give ourselves space to just be a fucking human, just be a person just for a second. And in that space, those integrations will happen. And then maybe we feel ready. Let's take on the next thing. But the propensity towards, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and then I'm going to go to this workshop and this retreat and this retreat and this retreat and this vipassana and this drug or medicine journey and this new book and this new thing, it can become addictive. And that more speaks again to our addictive nature as people, and that if given anything, like if it was like whittling is good for you, everyone would be whittling. I'm gonna show myself that I'm the best whittler in town. It's like that competitive edge that we have as well. Lena says, hearing you speak of this triggers the same other addictive parts of me. It surely is addictive. I give myself freedom to be a messy human now. I love it. I process because I want to grow, but it's not my full-time thing anymore. And that's, how beautiful is that, right? It's one of the nicest things. And Jillian Amber's son is sitting beside her whittling. Is he winning? I hope he's winning the whittling. If he wins the whittling, then everything's going to be great. So just to recap here, I'm really enjoying all the bounces with the comments, by the way, everyone. Thank you so much for that. It means the absolute world to me. So just to come back to it, we have lived in a culture where people did not process the pain that is inside their body. Now we're in a place where that's becoming commonplace for us to seek therapy and seek places where we can process with friends, with family. It's beautiful. It's the most important movement that's probably ever happened in the last number of thousands of years. Let's be careful that we don't get into a loop of endless processing where that's just all we're doing. Let's make sure that we allow ourselves to have the space to integrate and the space to simply be, not necessarily always just trying to be the next more healed person. That is a temptation that our mind will have, because when our body goes through processes and emotions, it fires off chemicals, and we can get addicted to those chemicals in our bodies. So remembering, like any addiction, that it's important to be gentle with ourselves. I'm not talking about then doing the opposite, like where you're like, okay, then just no more processing. Fuck, we'll just leave all that in there. It's not about that either. If we try to get into that sort of state, that's exactly what we come from, and we would never want to repeat that model. However, as we are creating new models, let's make sure not to make ones that have social and spiritual pressure. You know, that was a thing as well. I found that when people are really on their kick, and I'm very much, like, if anyone knows me from the past, very much my 20s was a whole decade of that. There's almost this little thing where we're like, did you process properly? Because if you didn't process properly, then I'm going to say that you're not really spiritual. You know, little spiritual threats. Like, oh, okay. Oh, really? You're still dealing with that, are you? Well, I guess you're not really as spiritual as I am. You know, like, we just have to be really careful about that spiritual ego and the insidiousness that can come up. Because if we are to try to showboat these things, or, you know, coaches, let's say, who are making a lot of money off of this, will want to show that I'm the best person to process, I'm the best, coolest new processor. And we do have to be careful to not fall into the same patterns that we're trying to get away from, but with spiritual words. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Let's go into that for a second. There's a post the other day that was like, you know, if we don't attend to or pay attention to the opposite of what we're trying to do, we might become that opposite. We are sitting here in this beautiful new time where we have a chance to see things from many different perspectives. We have a chance to go into oh geez, I just saw a cool comment just very quickly and I lost my train of thought. My 20 self sees your 20 self. Yeah, well, I think we actually knew each other in our 20s as well. And the other one actually that you brought up, which is really important, is I use the cycles of planetary movement for processing and integration. Whew, I love that. Yeah, I think that's one of the nicest ways to do it. So again, on a full moon, we're going to feel more reflective and more stuff comes up, and then in the new moon we're having more space, you know, and not to mention all the retrograding planets and stuff. So it is important. That's a really great way to do what we're talking about, to allow things to come up to process, but also to let it all go and just to be. If we can find good rhythms on that, which is, I'm saying you should find a good rhythm. Lisa's saying there already is one. Look up. tune into the actual rhythms that already exist, and then we can find them. That's actually a much more healthy way. It's nature based. It's as the druids would be. Like, I love that. I absolutely love that, Lisa. Thank you. And we're about to do a live stream next week. So this coming Monday night for people in Nova Scotia, and this Tuesday morning for my friends here in Australia, Lisa and I are going to go on stream together. And yeah, she just mentioned that we'll talk about that too, these natural rhythms. Next comment here is Jillian Amber. The embodied warrior is the heart warrior who has the courage to process and release and receives inspired action forward. The disembodied warrior doesn't allow processing and is blame, drama, trauma, and autopilot action. I love that. Yeah, well, you certainly want to be the embodied one in that scenario, wouldn't we? Yeah, and I don't miss being like that. It makes sense, Sasha comes in to say something like, we become that which we oppose. Yeah, so let's go back into, that's what we were talking about before I got lost in all the amazing interaction here. Again, it means the world to me. And thank you very much, Sasha. It was a great conversation. So the temptation, let's say, there's a big push, for example, in political space to, I'm just trying to think of a good way to put this. Sorry, give me a second here. So that which we oppose, we could easily become if we don't keep our eye on it. I think that's, you know, and I gave a couple of examples in my comments on that post. One of them is a really strong desire towards environmentalism, which is beautiful, right? Where we're like, okay, we need to change environmental field. But if we start to get too serious into that and then don't check the opposition, we end up starting to hate humanity in general. We don't want to hate humanity. Humanity is very much intrinsically a part of nature. It's a part of the environment. And so it's just possible whenever we become zealous on anything. So we're talking in this talk is all about becoming zealous on processing, becoming really so intense on processing that we actually start to lose our ground, and we start to, our body almost gets so inflamed through all that processing, and we don't integrate that we become almost a fucking bubbling mess. So be careful of that. That same thing, I just lost my train of thought fucking completely. Well, I love that. I'm happy that we're in a place that we can, I can chill here with you guys, because it feels more like we're hanging out than anything. So if I do lose my train of thought, it's okay. Is it okay? I mean, it's okay for me. Is it okay for you? Um, you know what it is as well? I'm a fairly sensitive person, and now tuning into and bouncing with 4 or 5 different people right now, I feel like I'm just getting too excited. Like I'm tuning into one person, I'm like, oh, those are all really cool things. Tuning out, oh, those are all really cool things. So this is again all a practice and process, these live streams. You know, back before doing these live streams, I only started really doing them around the start of the coronavirus. So it's just a few years ago. I was so scared to go live. Hey, I spent so much time in fear in my body. And I felt like what I had to share was so important. This is also my own complex. I have all this important stuff to share, and it's too important, because if I don't say it properly, I'm gonna fuck the whole thing up. And if I am not able to communicate it properly, then it's gonna fuck everything up for everyone, you know. And and I felt so scared that people would be like, actually, Josh, you're a bad person, you're an asshole. And I'd be like, oh my god, it's live, what am I supposed to do? I'm so scared. I had a lot of fear in my body around going live, because what if I, you know, started gaffing and fucked up my words? But it's amazing, this process of doing this, because what am I supposed to do? Like if I fuck up my words, I'm still just standing right here. And recently, I went to do some pre-recorded stuff. So to sit on a pre-recorded camera using this exact iPad, and it was absolutely fucking grueling, because all of those insecurities and the fear of, and if I stumbled, I would just stop, you know, almost like, oh, live streams just force us to just keep going, because what the fuck else are we gonna do? Look, I'm going to start wrapping this up. I usually do about a half an hour when I'm doing these solos. So if anyone has anything that they want to bounce here in the comments, either a question or a comment that we can expand on, please do write it in the comments over the next couple of minutes, and that'll keep the live stream going. But just to recap what we're talking about, we're talking about the tendency of the human mind to get addicted to the things that we're doing. And that when it's applied to spiritual and healing principles, it's possible to become addicted to spiritual and healing processes. While that doesn't sound like such a bad thing, because fuck, there's worse addictions, right? It actually can become an issue in our lives, because when we're constantly processing, we're inflaming the different points of trauma and pain in our body. And if we're constantly doing that without the space in order to integrate and understand what's going on, without the grace that comes for ourselves too, because, you know, we can't be perfect. Trust me, I tried. And desiring to be spiritually perfected being, as nice as that sounds, ends up sometimes becoming its own issue. And so that's what we were trying to talk about before, the opposition. So if we came from a world where that was deadened, let's say, emotionally, mentally, physically deadened, now we're in this beautiful time where things are opening up. We have space to emotionally process. We have spiritual, an influx of spiritual concept and understanding that comes through. We are lucky as all hell to live in this time, but it's possible to then start to overdo that process of spirit connection and spiritual healing to the point where it starts to deaden us again in a new way. So it can go full circle, and we can go first full circle, but it'd be better to go full spiral. So we're constantly moving still. If we find ourselves the same issues, the same processes, we have to just, it's possible to do a little check-in with ourselves. Am I addicted to this? Is there a chemical addiction that's happening through these processes that is actually keeping me going through this pain? because the actual pain and release process is so fucking exciting, that it's possible to get stuck in that run. This is what this is about. Lisa is saying that she enjoys the live stream format. Me too. And again, the interactions just mean the world to me. Isn't it interesting that we're all going through our own version of this together? It is so beautiful. I was so hard on myself, convinced I would do whatever it takes to reach enlightenment during this lifetime. I hug my old self. And so blessed we've been close friends through all this. I very much agree, Lena. Yeah, it's the addiction and the push to try to be perfect, to try to be the most spiritual, to try to be and again, the spiritual threats that come through the circles as well. There's spiritual threats all over the place. Like, if you don't do this, you're not spiritual. If you don't do that, you're not spiritual. If you make a mistake, you better repent. Well, that's all just Christianity repackaged and reformatted anyway, right? I would say that while we are pushing into these new modes of spirituality, because the ancestral pain and link of heavy religious dogma is still in our bodies, the chances of us repurposing that dogma into our new spiritual understandings is pretty fucking high. But having awareness around that, being able to communicate that to close friends, being able to be honest and real with ourselves, can help dismantle some of that stuff. Just wanted to end one more thing. When it comes to endless processing, that's actually something that can happen a lot in the in groups as well. And sometimes this is something that's taught in spiral dynamics, is that it is possible to get into a desire for consensus that is so strong that the feeling is that everyone needs to agree for us to move forward. While this can absolutely work in smaller groups of, let's say, 5 to 20 people, trying to apply that en masse, having everybody agree before we move forward, is pretty much fucking impossible. And the only reason to say that, because again, it's better to try to achieve consensus than to not. So the same thing as we've been talking about through all of this, it's better to try to go through that process than to not. But it is possible to get into endless processing in group form too, where it's pretty much like there's no actual movement. No individual can step up to kind of move something forward because constantly trying to find consensus. I've been in plenty of meetings in plenty of spaces where this starts to happen. And again, it's much better to do that than to not. So it's much better to want to take everyone's opinion into consideration than to just be like, fuck it. Like, this is the few people in power here can make the decisions. Everyone else can fuck off. We don't want that. But if we do find ourselves in group settings that start to become mired in endless processing, it's important to recognize that this can become a problem too. It can become a thing where nothing really happens. You know, the typical hippie thing is that a lot of people are there and a lot of words are being spoken, but fuck, nothing's actually even happening in real life. So the temptation towards endless processing in groups and in circles can be a thing as well. So how this actually applies to you and your life and we and our lives as a collective is highly personalized. But just to recap, it is possible to go into our own processes in such a way that we don't have a return from them. We're not able to get out of the process and into rebalance our bodies. That's not good. It's also possible in group settings to start to process and to try to find this process so much that we're not actually able to move forward with anything or achieve anything. That's not good either. All of these things, though, are still better than the past of no processing emotionally, just living as like a deadened being. You can see people used to age faster because, again, we're just in constant stress and so much pains in our body unprocessed. And also the old style of community processing. It's like, we don't care about you. You're the marginalized one. You can just fuck off. So neither of those are good. These are still better than that. But even when we're doing something new and better, it's important to have little balancers or little criticisms that help move those processes forward as well. Would you say that processing addiction is similar to staying victimization? Victimization is a funny one. It comes up quite a bit. There's a feeling of people in victim consciousness and that sort of stuff. Again, just like anything, to be able to own that we're feeling victimized, because it could be victimized. Like, there is victimization that happens all the fucking time. People hurt each other all the time. There's narcissistic abuse that is like constant. And so not being able to own the fact that we're being victimized can be a problem in itself. It's like, because I learned we shouldn't be victims. So therefore, I'm not going to say that I'm being victimized when I'm literally being victimized. It's very important not to fall into that either, because again, that's like a philosophy hijacking the actual reality of a situation. The philosophy being that we shouldn't be victims, the reality being that sometimes we are. However, if we start kicking into a zone where we're constantly feeling victimized and everyone's an oppressor and everyone's the thing, that can become its own addiction absolutely as well. So where is the line between those two realities? Well, the one would be us being able to just be real with ourselves that, hey, this person stepped over my boundaries and actually it really hurt me. Being able to own that and say that is beautiful. Feeling that everything is constantly victimizing us no matter what's going on, that can become a problem too. It's always just the Buddhist teaching is that a string on a guitar can either be too tight or it can be too loose, but we're trying to find that middle. So in that situation, it is possible to stay in victimization when we are addicted to the pain that we can't get out of. It is important. Yes, it is possible to have that stay in victimization. It is possible to have that be that we are constantly reviewing the same issues and our emotions are suddenly getting the better of us and we are constantly in that. It is possible. However, it's important also to be like, yo, this is actually true. This is a moment where there is a victimization that I am victim in this moment, but I'm not a victim as an identity, and there is a difference there. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off now. This has been so beautiful and overstimulating in a way, too. That's why I'm going to sign off now, because all of these beautiful questions and comments and expansions have just been just so fucking great. I would rather do this and have actual communication with people than talk to myself or speak like I'm a guru that has all the answers. I'd rather have these bounces where I love criticisms and I love expansions as well. So please always feel free for all of that. Love y'all, and we'll talk soon.